Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsberger. I've got my father, Alan Huntsberger, in the studio. We're going to start off with our foundational verse that we love. The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. For he laid its foundation on the seas and established it on the rivers. Psalm 24, 1 and 2. Dad, why do we say this verse every single program?
Because it's true. This is the Lord's world. It's the Lord's earth, and we are his inhabitants. Now, the interesting thing is some of you might rebel against that, and that's the beautiful thing of what God did way back in creation. In the Garden of Eden, he allowed man to have a choice. He threw it in there, just saying you can eat any tree of any fruit, all over. It's, glorious, but one, don't touch, or, you'll die.
And of course, that's the one we went for.
Well, yeah.
The one you can't have.
That's right.
Right.
The interesting thing is, though, that the earth, I love, I got to go back to Jeremiah, because Jeremiah 51:15 says he made the earth by his power. That's God's power. He established the world by his wisdom. So some people think that, I don't think this, God wasn't very wise in what he did. No, he established the world by his wisdom and spread out the heavens by his understanding. Now, this is amazing because, the scripture basically says that you see creation, and because of creation, everything about God is made known through creation. And therefore, no one is without excuse about, I don't know God. Because if you lived on this earth, you lived on God's earth. And you can find God all over the place. If you just ask him, he'll show you.
Yeah,
That's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I'm excited about our guest. We're going to bring him on. His name is Braeden. You know what? It just hit me. Braeden, is your dad the famous Kevin Sorbo?
Braeden possible. Sorbo? I like to say only by blood.
Your dad, Mr. Hercules himself. Welcome to the show, by the way. Congratulations on your book. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about your book, Embrace Masculinity, lifting men up in a world that pushes them down. Let's go. You've got the most masculine dad on the planet, Mr. Hercules himself. What's that like?
Man, I wish I had a better answer. It's my most common question. You'd think I'd have something a little more thought out, but it's normal. I don't have a point of reference. That's what I grew up with. Yeah. Thank God. I was definitely blessed, like you said, with having a masculine, Herculean role model. I mean, I think he was half God, which makes me a quarter demigod. Is that how the math works out? So I've been certainly blessed, but it's normal.
Before we get into it, I want to just Isaiah 6:8. You've got this on your. Alan, can you read this? I want to read Isaiah 6:8 because it's on your bio. I think it's on Instagram. And Alan, read it for us.
Isaiah 6:8.
This is on your bio on Instagram. Go.
It says, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me.
Let's start there. Why did you pick that verse for your bio? Which, by the way, I always read people's verses in their bios. I love this verse. I love it. What does it mean to you?
Well, I picked it, one, because it was a little bit unique, and I find that the situation that we live in today is one that we don't necessarily have a reference point in history. I mean, they say history repeats itself, but it's kind of hard for history to repeat itself if we've never been to something of this degree. I mean, we'll get into it more, but the situations the young men are being put in today, while it is similar to previous situations, is altogether in itself a new beast. And so Isaiah 6:8, the here I am, Lord, send me, really, really spoke to me. When I opened my Bible, I was reading one night, I was going, that is my calling. That is what I'm supposed to do. And so I sat down, I wrote the book, and the Lord has continued to call me since this day. I mean, I've been toying with the idea of running for some sort of representational office in some way, shape, or form in the political sphere, which would suck. But that's if I'm the one being called, I guess I have to go.
You'll take the shots to the chin, right, for everybody else in the next generation to come, for sure. What is specifically he's calling you to do? Now, I know we're going to get into masculinity, but is it to run for office? Is that really what you kind of feel called to do?
It's to fix a broken system. He's calling me, the Lord is calling me to be a voice, to be someone, because I've certainly been through my personal struggles as well, and I'm 23 years old now. I can sit here and talk to people in my generation, not from a point of, well, I love Jordan Peterson, Nick Freitas. Those guys they do fantastic work, and they are 50 plus years old, married with kids. They can't relate in the same way that I can to somebody. And so I am called in the sense to be that voice for my generation and to really speak out for my generation and say, look, I've been there, I've done that, and I can tell you it's not fulfilling. I can tell you it's only going to lead you darker down a worse path, and you need to change. And so I'm advocating for change, and masculinity is the cornerstone and that pillar of change that we need so desperately in society today.
Yeah.
Braeden, I believe that there's I don't know what you want to call it, but a beginning of a revival that is particularly among young adults like yourself. I mean, we attend a church, and it's huge. And I would say the majority of the congregation is made up of young adults. Many of them not married yet. Some of them are, but they're young adults. Do you find that that's what happened? Because when I was young, when I was your age, I was a youth pastor back in the 70s, and it was the same way. It was the Jesus People movement. And I was a chaplain of the high school football team, and they all wanted me to pray and get out the Word of God and read, and I led many of the kids to the Lord. Is that happening again, do you think, with your younger generation?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. What we saw previously, and this was before the Jesus Revolution and a little bit after, back in the 70s, was this rebellion, right? The people saying, screw the man, we're going to go do our own thing. And it was a rebellion against God. And now the government has become God. And so people are rebelling against it by turning back to God, which is kind of funny and ironic and uplifting all at the same time. Unfortunately, we're noticing this trend is particularly in young men. We have a lot of these essentially feel good, I like to call them feel good mega organizations, because I don't really know if I would attribute the title church to some of these buildings, but those are predominantly filled with young women because of the relationship kind of feeling aspect that they get from feeling, right? And so a lot of young men who are logical, rational beings are sitting here going, well, that's not really going to be, uplifting for me. That's not going to really pull me closer to God. And so they're looking for order. They're looking for a system that's been in place, that is set, that can help guide them down this roadmap of life. And so we're actually seeing a large return to orthodoxy and Catholicism within young men, which is kind of surprising because I remember the 70s Jesus Revolution wasn't like that in the slightest. But so you see these young men, and we saw it with the election as well. Young guys overwhelmingly are voting red, whereas young women are overwhelmingly voting blue. And so this divide is actually the biggest it's ever been in the history of our country between the sexes. But with the men going in the right direction, the women will eventually follow.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Let's get into the book because, for men, when it used to be men are stupid, men are dumb, doofus dad, all the roles in the movies, we were dumb, just dumb, dumb, dumb. And then it went into really kind of feminizing men. Men got to be more feminine, you know what I mean? And now it just seems, I've been looking at that there's this whole nother campaign that's popping up about kill all men now that we're here. First, you're dumb. Now you got to be more feminine. Now let's kill. So let's get into your book. Tell us what's in it. I want to hear a little more detail. Tell us about the book.
Well, the book is a guide, a handbook for godly masculinity living in the world, and even more so in America today. I mean, like you said, the world that we live in, and specifically this country, has told men for the past century, very slowly and it's ramped up much more frequently over the past decade or two, that men are useless, that they're weak, that they're pathetic, that they're a laughingstock, that they're not important, that they shouldn't be valued in society, like you said, with the media, making them the joke, making them fat, lazy, idiotic, that kind of thing. And that didn't necessarily work because there were still plenty of guys who were getting married and leading their families and then their congregations and their communities and eventually their countries. And so the society at large, the people in charge decided, okay, well, we can't do anything with that. I actually wrote the third chapter of the book is titled The War Between the Patriarchies. And it basically says that it's not a matter of if a man will be leading, it's a matter of which men will be leading and if they will be good or bad. And we see this in the time of Exodus with Pharaoh. The Pharaoh during the time of Joseph and his 11 brothers was a good Pharaoh, a generous Pharaoh who let Joseph come in and allowed his brothers to stay in the land. And then a couple hundred years later, you have the Pharaoh during the time of the Exodus with Moses. And so the patriarchs will do one of three things. They will try to make the men worthless. They will try to crush their spirit, essentially, feed them bread and circuses, call them lazy, fat, and stupid, which we saw. That didn't work. They will try to force them, because manpower is great. That's how do you get pyramids if not with strong men lifting big things, right? So they will try to subjugate the men into their control. And then lastly, if that doesn't work, because society's already been built. I mean, society needs men to keep it running, but for the most part, we've built a lot of society to the point where people feel comfortable thinking that men are irrelevant, which obviously you and I and the viewers here know is wrong. But the last method, which is the stage that we are at now, is the destruction of men. If you cannot subjugate or placate the men, you must destroy them. Just like what the Pharaoh did during the time of Moses with the babies by killing the Hebrew children, drowning them in the river and that kind of thing. That's what we have today, except people aren't necessarily going outright and just drowning babies, aside from abortion, which we all know is the murder of an innocent child in the womb, which is one method they're doing it. They're also destroying a man's soul. And the biggest way that they're doing that is through pornography, because it not only subjugates you and placates you, making you a slave and killing your drive, your desire to contribute to society. It destroys your soul, your ability to feel love and your ability to form connections. And as men, we yearn for that connection. We don't need to be connected to 30 people. We don't need to be connected to 20 people or 10 people. We need to be connected to our family. That is the most important thing. And if we cannot form a connection with our immediate family, they have won. And that is what we're at in society today. There was a study that came out recently that said 45% of men between the ages of 18 and 35 have not approached a woman in real life, have not talked to a woman in real life.
48?
Because
What's the number on that?
45%
Whoa.
from 18 to 25. And it's because these men have pornography. They fear rejection, but the girl on the screen isn't going to reject them. She'll do everything their heart desires. And so instead of actually going out into the world and trying to better themselves and trying to grow, they can just, this is why I say that we have a different situation than anyone else before us.
Yeah.
Because on my phone, I have access to something that kings couldn't have. I have access to something that the highest people in the world didn't have access to. The amount of lustful content and the amount of sin in the world today is at a level that is unparalleled to anything in our history, at least that we're aware of. And so I say that this battle that we have to fight is arguably the hardest one yet, because it is a war directly on the spirit itself.
Yeah. You know, there's been a movie out where young men are getting together with older men, and the older men are trying to help the younger men get into business as well as get into discipleship and help them grow. Do you feel that there's a hunger for younger men to join with men that have a wholesome, good relationship with their wife, strong relationship with the Lord Jesus? Do you find that kind of thing wanting to other young men?
It depends on the man. I would say overwhelmingly yes. And I wrote about it once again in the book. I have a chapter called Fraternity is Good. It talks about the necessity of having a close circle of brothers that you can rely on that will keep you accountable. Proverbs 6:7 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one brother sharpens another, right? So there is something crucial instilled in us from our birth to want to be better. And when we refuse to fall victim to the traps and pitfalls that society sets, we actually take steps towards that. And so picking a mentor is absolutely critical in this endeavor. We need somebody who has been through the same trials and has come out victorious. That's why I don't knock, the people like Nick Freitas who stand there and say he got married at 19. Now he has a couple beautiful kids with his wife. He's been together ever since. That's amazing. That is a man that I can look up to, and I can go, and I just met him. That's why he's on my mind. I was at the Live Action Pro-Life Summit just recently, and he was one of the speakers there. I was one of the social media ambassadors for them. And he gave this story of how, it's not a lost cause. There are still women out there looking for good men to lead them. You just need to be good men who are worth submitting to. And so I tell a lot of men, you're not worthy of a submissive wife until you yourself become a man who knows how to lead, who knows how to protect, who knows how to provide. The things that society deems irresponsible and replaceable are actually the most critical.
Braeden, where did we fail? I mean, I know we need to improve. Where did it all crumble? I know the lamestream media is going to continue, and the propaganda and the machine and the globalists and all the evil's going to be out there to keep banging and bashing on men all day long. where did the men of today, the fathers of today, people like me, where did we fail where we didn't stand up and push back enough? Do you know where that happened?
I do, and I have a feeling a lot of the people at home aren't going to like it, but I'll tell,
Okay.
and I speak the truth, and
Yeah.
that's just how it is.
Go for it.
We failed with the feminist movements because the family unit was the single strongest unit in American history. That was an indestructible monolith, a pillar that stood foundational to the truth of the Bible. And so when you had a Christian man leading his family, his responsibility for his family overtook every other aspect of his life. He lived his entire life with a purpose, and that purpose was to protect and serve and, if need be, sacrifice himself for his family. And so when the government came in and they said, you know what, we don't have control of half of the population. How do we get control of half of the population and get the kids in schools? We convince women that they don't have any rights. We convince them that they're just these objects and that they need these rights. And so this whole 19th Amendment came up into being. And the first things that were voted on, by the way, when the 19th Amendment was passed, only 4% of women actually wanted the right to vote. But the first things that were passed with the new 100% voter base was the laws that essentially started the abortion movement and the credit score / interest that we now have today. And so the original family unit, the man voted as one total vote for his entire family, and he then took the responsibility of everyone. So if the country was going to succeed, his vote counted, and if it failed, it was all on him. And so that sort of unity that we saw within the family unit, where everyone's voice was heard and represented with a single vote from a single person, or from a family unit as the single person, was something that was so powerful that it had to be destroyed. And it breaks my heart. I have girls today at like the event, the live action event, going, what were we thinking? You know, now we have to go work a 9 to 5 in an office job and we submit to a boss instead of a husband. That's not biblical. I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to sit there working 60 hours a week taking desk calls to some guy that doesn't even like or respect me. I would rather have a man that serves and spends his entire life taking care of me. That sounds like a much better deal.
Yeah, interesting. So that's the fail. Where do you think the turn has happened? Because we are starting to see a turn. Now, for me, I'm going to, I think what the turn was is when men were, the transgender allowed to participate in female sports. I think that woke up a lot of guys going, wait a minute. We've been scared of the feminists. Where are the feminists now? Now guys can compete against women. I thought where's the feminists? They're not there. They're not speaking out. They're not. So where do you think the turn has been recently that we're starting to see men becoming men again and standing up and speaking out and protecting their families?
That's definitely a great starting point, and I would argue it goes back a tiny bit further to the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution during the 60s and 70s was the beginning of the end, so to speak. That was the slippery slope where we started at the top and it was kind of an overarching, and then we just straight down. Because what happened was, as you and I and all the viewers know, is men can have a one-night stand, and the repercussions are mainly psychological and spiritual, but nothing necessarily physical unless they catch something. Women can't have a one-night stand because they always run the risk of getting pregnant. When abortion became normalized and passed in 1972 with Roe v. Wade, those repercussions went away, and people started sleeping around. And it was that sleeping around that essentially was the turning point for a lot of people, because it wasn't until the men and women's sports started to take up that more and more people, through this rampant society with OnlyFans and pornography becoming more mainstream, started to realize, okay, wait, everything is wrong. Everything, like nothing is correct anymore. What happened? We need to go back. And so we have a lot of boys. I call them boys because they refuse to grow up. They're over in Neverland with Peter Pan, the Lost Boys. And they're sitting there complaining about not being able to find a good woman and all this stuff. And to be fair, they are correct to a degree, but they're also not right in the sense that they themselves are not good or ready for a good woman. But it is very difficult when you have this sexual revolution taking over, where as a woman, the most empowering thing you can do in 2025 is sell your body. But I thought women weren't objects. It's a very weird conundrum that we have today. And a lot of guys are waking up to it, realizing that it is not beneficial to society. And that right there is the turning point. It started back in the 60s and 70s, and it really came full circle just in the past decade or so with transgenders in sports and the pornography movement.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously have a father-son program. What do you think that relationship can do to help young men get into the right relationship so that they then lead a family?
It's absolutely critical for a father and a son to have a good relationship. I mean, we have countless studies, I can't even name them all, where it shows that a father being present in the child's life leads to a higher percentage of success in school. So basically, if you have an absent father in the household, the kids are more prone to drugs, more prone to violence and being arrested, more prone to suicide, depression, anxiety, and other mental disorders, and among other things, less likely to be religious. So even if the father is in the home present, but not spiritually present, the kids are less likely to be religious. So there is almost no effect on if the mother attends church or not, but there is 70+% of an effect when the father attends church. And I wrote about that there's multiple different types of guys, and one of the people is called the sturdy oak, Owen, where he essentially is physically present. He's in the room, but he's not spiritually present. He's not spiritually leading his family and guiding them in the direction that they should go. Kids subconsciously look up to their parents for guidance. They know to look up for their father for spiritual guidance because we have a father in heaven. Just like in the order that Jesus instituted, where Jesus submitted to the will of the Father, not because he's less than the Father, but because he knows that there's a divine order in the universe. And so you have God the Father, who Jesus submits to, and then the parents who submit to Jesus, and then the kids who submit to the parents. And you have this kind of chain effect where through the chain of command, you build the family unit, which is why it's so powerful. And that's why the destructive purposes that our government had in place have been so effective, because when they remove that chain between Jesus and the parents by splitting the parents up and pitting them against each other, you can't reach Jesus through the kids can't reach Jesus.
Now, as an actor's son, you lived in the shadow of your dad, just like Corey here has led in the shadow of his pastor father. Does that have an effect?
I would say no. I mean, I've been blessed with the social media account that I have. I have almost 2 million followers, but I started that account by just naming myself Braeden S. I didn't try to use my last name to gain anything. I said to myself, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show that I can do it. And once I hit about 500,000 followers, I said, okay, now it's time to build my name and add my brand and all that stuff. But I've proven to myself that just because I have this last name doesn't mean that it is who I am. And as much as I love being able to be in the shadows of my dad, I'm already bigger than him in terms of physically. I'm 6'5", 230 pounds, and he was 6'3", 230 during Hercules. So I got him beat there. Now I just need to be bigger than him in the other senses.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this book is a battle cry for men to step up, not just for themselves, but for their families and communities. You challenge men to embody virtues like integrity, responsibility, resilience. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, they are the opposite of the virtues that the left is trying to say is good, right? The left says masculinity itself is toxic. Responsibility is toxic. You don't own that woman. Like you don't own your wife. And it's like, well, no, you don't own, but you have a biblical marriage, which means that your wife submits to you and you sacrifice for her. Paul writes that people always forget Ephesians 5:23, where wives are called to submit to their church or to their husbands as Christ did the Father. Right. They go, well, that's subjective and you're just an object in that sense, but they never read the rest of it, Ephesians 5:25, where it says, husbands, sacrifice yourself for your wife like Christ did the church.
Yes.
That's the whole point. If I get married, my wife becomes an attachment of me. Like if I were to break my arm, I would put it in a cast. If I were to stub my toe, I would put ice on it. You know what I mean? In that same sense, that's how I'm supposed to take care of my wife. And so a lot of people fail to see that. But our society at large, which as we all know has turned away from God, and we're getting that revival now, praise the Lord, decides that masculinity itself is toxic. And so what happens is the guys suppress all of those emotions. Romans 1, Paul writes that the law is instilled in our hearts. We know the difference between right or wrong. That's why kids feel guilty when they steal at 5 years old. They know inherently that it's wrong, but they just do it anyways because they don't have that moral compass fully established yet. And so when we don't allow our moral compass to establish, masculinity or a lack thereof kind of reflects outward in who we become. We become toxic, manipulative, abusive, and controlling. And that is why you have so many men who are pro-choice, because they would much rather. I just made a video on this because at the conference I did a collaboration with a couple of the other guys, and we're all 6'2", 220 plus pounds, like 4 big dudes. And all of the comments were going, ladies, cover your drinks around these guys. And I'm going, you guys, you don't realize that the guys who are pro-abortion are the sexual assaulters and the abusers, because they don't have to deal with the consequences of their actions if they can force an abortion on the woman. Like the logic doesn't seem to compute for the left, which is what we're trying to show. But yes, a lack of masculinity is what's toxic, not masculinity itself.
Embrace Masculinity, lifting men up in a world that pushes them down. Where can we get the book?
People can go to sorbostudios.com if they want to pick up a copy. I will be signing all of the copies. They're shipping around the end of April, so you should get them just in time for graduation for your high school, college friends, sons, nephews. If you don't have a kid, buy it for 5 of your friends. I don't care.
We really appreciate you. We're grateful. You are, can I tell you, you're an answer to prayer, because our generation's praying for the younger generation, and it's encouraging for us to see you do what you're doing, speaking the way you're speaking, because it's, we know we're in a really tough spot, but we're excited that people are waking up and your generation is not going to be duped like some other generations were.
Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. I need everyone's prayers to keep going down this path. It's definitely painful. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of stress, anxiety, and definitely a heavy burden on my family. So all prayers are accepted and welcomed.
Braeden, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll have you back.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Well, Alan, encouraging that the younger generation is, I just feel good. I could die now knowing that we got enough people that like the world is in good hands. They're not as, I don't know, especially to the younger people. You see so many that are just lost and hurting and struggling and trying to figure themselves out and all this stuff. And then you see someone like Braeden and it's just,
I know it's a great encouragement, and sometimes we need to realize that the young men, and particularly the young men that we see in our churches, need to be encouraged, need to be built up, so that they continue the path that they're on for Jesus Christ. Yeah, and God's a part of his life, and I think you and I've said this forever and ever. You want truth, you want freedom, you want forgiveness and kindness and love and all the good things that everyone wants in their life. I mean, you get it through God. I'm sorry, you just do. Whether you like him or not, you do. We're offering a free booklet. It's called The Living Stone, A Journey of Transformation. You can get it for free by calling our toll-free number, 1-800-445-3450 in the U.S., 1-800-915-0056 in Canada. You get that book, you're going to increase your relationship with God, understand God, become part of the living stone, right? Amen. And that's what it is. It's a transformation journey. And, I heard a message on Sunday talking about faith and works, and out of the book of James. And basically, if you have faith in Jesus Christ, we're going to see that in what you do and how you live. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. You want to help support our mission, keep this conversation broadcast across our nation? We need your support. You can go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on the donate button. You can do it digitally there. Or if you'd like to support us through the mail, you can make a check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And you can always call our toll-free number, 1-800-915-0056, 1-800-445-3450 in the U.S. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll see you guys later. Love you.